Chapter 7. The Spiritual Sense of the Word. Correspondences. Each and all things which are in nature correspond to spiritual things. Similarly, each and all things which are in the human body, as may be seen in 2 articles in the work Heaven and Hell. But it is not known at this day what correspondence is. But in the most ancient times, the science of correspondences was the science of sciences, thus the universal science, so that the most ancient people wrote all their manuscripts and books by correspondences. The fables of the most ancient times and the hieroglyphics of the Egyptians are nothing else. The book of Job, which is a book of the ancient church, is full of correspondences. All the ancient churches were churches representative of heavenly things. All their rites, and also their statutes, according to which their worship was instituted, consisted of nothing but correspondences. Similarly, the church with the sons of Jacob, the burnt offerings and sacrifices with all their particulars, were correspondences. Likewise the tabernacle with the single things therein, as also their feasts, such as the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of tabernacles, and the feast of first fruits, and also all their statutes and judgments. And because correspondences are such things as exist in the ultimates of nature, and because all things of nature correspond, and the things which correspond also signify, therefore the sense of the letter of the word consists of nothing but correspondences. The Lord also, because he spoke from his divine, and spoke from the word, spoke therefore also by correspondences. What is from the divine, and in itself is divine, in the ultimate, falls into such things as correspond to divine, celestial, and spiritual things. Thus, such as in their bosom conceal and signify celestial and spiritual things. What further correspondences are may be seen in the Arcana Celestia, in which the correspondences which are in Genesis and Exodus are explained. And again a collection of citations from that work concerning correspondences may be seen in the Doctrine of the New Jerusalem and in the Treatise on Heaven and Hell. The spiritual or internal sense of the word is nothing else than the sense of the letter unfolded according to correspondences. For it teaches the spiritual which is perceived by angels in the heavens, while man in the world is thinking in a natural way of that which he reads in the word. I have heard and perceived from heaven that the men of the most ancient church, who are those meant in the spiritual sense of the first chapters of Genesis by Adam and Eve, were so consociated with the angels of heaven that they could speak with them by correspondences, and hence the state of their wisdom was such that whatever they saw on earth, they perceived at the same time spiritually, thus conjointly with the angels. It was told me that Enoch, of whom mention is made in Genesis, with his associates, collected correspondences from the mouth of those people, and transmitted the knowledge of them to posterity. From this it came to pass that the science of correspondences not only was known, but was also cultivated in many kingdoms of Asia, and especially in Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon, Syria, Mesopotamia, Arabia, and also in Canaan. From thence it was carried over to Greece, but was there turned into fables, as may be sufficiently evident from what is told of Olympus, Helicon, and Pindus, near Athens, and also of the winged horse called Pegasus, as that with the hoof he brake open a fountain, by which the 9 virgins, the Muses, established their seats. For a mountain, and thus Helicon, from correspondence signifies the higher heaven. The hill under the mountain, which was Pindus, signifies the heaven below it. The winged horse, or Pegasus, signifies the understanding enlightened by the spiritual. The fountain signifies intelligence and learning, and the 9 virgins signify the knowledges of truth and the sciences. Similar were the rest of the things which are called fabulous, which were written by the most ancient writers in Greece, and which were collected together and described by Ovid in his Metamorphoses. But when the representatives of the church in the course of time were turned into idolatries, then by the divine providence of the Lord that science was successively obliterated, and with the Israelitish and Jewish nation it was altogether destroyed and extinguished. The worship of that nation was indeed altogether representative, but still they did not know what any representative thing signified. For they were altogether natural men, and hence they were neither able nor willing to know anything about the spiritual man and about his faith and love, consequently nothing about correspondences. That the idolatries of the nations in ancient times derived their origin from the science of correspondences amongst them was because all things that appear upon the earth have a correspondence, as not only trees, but also cattle and birds of every kind, as well as fishes and the rest. The ancients, who were in the science of correspondences, made themselves images which corresponded to spiritual things, and they were delighted with those things, because they signified such things as are of heaven and thence of the church. They therefore not only placed them in their temples, but also in their houses, not for the purpose of adoration, but for the recollection of the heavenly thing that was signified. Thence in Egypt there were set up calves, oxen, serpents, boys, old men, virgins, and many other things. For a calf signified the innocence of the natural man, oxen, affections of the natural man, serpents, the prudence of the sensual man, a boy, innocence, old men, wisdom, virgins, affection for truth, and so on. After the science of correspondences was there lost, their posterity, who were ignorant what the images and likenesses set up by the ancients signified, began to worship them as holy, and finally as deities, because they were placed in and near the temples. The Egyptian hieroglyphics are from the same origin. So was it also with other nations, as with the Philistines in Ashdod, where was Dagon, formed like a man above and like a fish below, which image was so contrived because a man signifies rational intelligence, and a fish natural knowledge. From similar origin was the worship of the ancients in gardens and groves, according to the kinds of trees, as also their sacred worship upon mountains, for gardens and groves signified spiritual intelligence, and each tree something thereof, as the olive its good of love, the vine its truth of the doctrine of faith, the cedar its rational, and so on. A mountain signified heaven, and therefore the worship of the most ancient people was upon mountains. That the science of correspondences remained with many Oriental nations until the coming of the Lord may be evident from the wise men from the East who came to the Lord when he was born. Therefore a star went before them, and they brought with them gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It was also said to the shepherds, in order that they might know that it was the Lord himself, that it should be a sign unto them, that they should see him in a manger, wrapped in swaddling clothes, because there was no place in the inn. The star which went before the wise men signified knowledge from heaven, for stars in the word signify knowledges. The gold signified celestial good, frankincense spiritual good, and myrrh natural good, all worship being from these three. The manger in which the infant Lord was found by the shepherds signifies spiritual nourishment, because horses which are fed from a manger signify intellectual things. The inn, where there was no place, signified the Jewish church, in which at that time there was no spiritual nourishment, because everything of the word, and thence everything of worship with them, had then been adulterated and perverted. Hence it is said that this would be for a sign to them that it was the Lord. Nevertheless, the science of correspondences was altogether none with the Israelitish and Jewish nation, although all things of their worship, and all the statutes and judgments given to them, and all things of the word, were pure correspondences. The reason was that that nation was idolatrous in heart, and such that it did not even wish to know that anything of their worship signified anything celestial and spiritual. For they wished that all these things should be holy from themselves, and with them in externals. Wherefore, if spiritual and celestial things had been disclosed to them, they would not only have rejected, but would also have profaned them. For this reason heaven was closed to them, so that they scarcely knew that they were to live after death. That this is so is manifestly evident. They do not acknowledge the Lord, although the whole sacred Scripture prophesied concerning him, and predicted him, They rejected him for this sole reason, that he taught them of the heavenly kingdom, and not concerning an earthly kingdom. For they wanted a Messiah who would exalt them above all nations in the whole world, and they did not wish any Messiah who would provide for their eternal salvation. Moreover, they say the word contains in itself many arcana, which are called mystical, but they do not wish to know that these treat of the Lord and his kingdom, but they do wish to know when it is said that they are concerning gold and alchemy. That this science was not disclosed after those times was because the Christians in the primitive church were very simple, that it could not be disclosed to them, for if disclosed it would have been of no use to them, nor would it have been comprehended. After those times darkness arose over the entire Christian world, on account of the papacy, which at length became Babylon, and they who are of Babel, and have confirmed themselves in its falsities, are for the most part natural, sensual men, and these are neither able nor willing to apprehend what is spiritual. Thus, what is the correspondence of natural things with spiritual? But after the Reformation, because they began to make a distinction between faith and charity, and to worship one God under three persons, thus three gods, whom they only named one, heavenly truths were then concealed from them, lest, if revealed, they should falsify them and bend them to faith alone, and none of them to charity and love. If therefore the spiritual sense of the word had then been revealed, they would have shut heaven to themselves even by the falsification of its truths. For every one is allowed to understand the sense of the letter of the word in simplicity, provided he does not confirm the appearances of truth which are there, so far as to destroy genuine truth. For to interpret the word as to its spiritual sense from falsities of doctrine closes heaven and does not open it, but to interpret the spiritual sense from the truths of doctrine opens heaven, because that is the sense in which the angels are, and so man by means of it thinks together with angels, and thus conjoins them to himself in his intellectual mind. But if a man is in falsities of doctrine and wishes to explore the spiritual sense from some knowledge of correspondences, he falsifies it. It is otherwise if man is already in genuine truths. That sense agrees with truths and appears from them, because that sense is in the light of heaven. Cloud, on the other hand, agrees with falsities, and if anything of this truth should appear, instead of the light of heaven, thick darkness would arise. For angels turn themselves away from him, and so close heaven to him. The spiritual sense of the word is meant by the inner garment of the Lord, which was without seam, and which the soldiers were not permitted to divide, but the natural sense of the word, which is the sense of its letter, is meant by his outer garments, which the soldiers divided. Garments in the word signify truths, and the Lord's garments divine truth. Wherefore also the garments of the Lord, when he was transfigured before Peter, James, and John, appeared shining white like light. At this day the spiritual sense of the word has been revealed from the Lord, because the doctrine of genuine truth has now been revealed, which doctrine is partly contained in the doctrine of the New Jerusalem, and now in the small works which are being given to the public. And because that doctrine and no other agrees with the spiritual sense of the word, therefore that sense, together with the science of correspondences, has now for the first time been disclosed. That sense is also signified by the Lord's appearing in the clouds of heaven with glory and power, in which chapter it treats of the consummation of the age, by which is meant the last time of the church. By the cloud of heaven, there and elsewhere in the word, is signified the word in the letter, which there, in respect to the spiritual sense, is as a cloud. But by the glory there, as also elsewhere in the word, is signified the word in the spiritual sense, which also is the divine truth and light, and by the power is signified its power in the word. The revelation of the word, as to the spiritual sense, was also promised in the Apocalypse, where that sense is meant by the white horse, and by the great supper of God, to which all were invited and gathered together. By many, that sense will not be acknowledged for a long time. Those alone who are in the falsities of doctrine, especially in regard to the Lord, and who do not admit truths, will not acknowledge that this is meant by the beast and by the kings of the earth, who make war with the one sitting upon the white horse. By the beast are meant the Roman Catholics, as in and by the kings of the earth are meant the Reformed, who are in falsities of doctrine. The mystical things which some seek in the Word are nothing else than the spiritual and celestial senses. Chapter 8. The marriage of the Lord with the Church, which is the marriage of good and truth in the Word. It is known that the Lord is called in the Word the bridegroom and husband, and the Church the bride and wife. That the Lord and the Church are so called is because of the conjunction of good and truth with everyone who is in heaven and who is in the Church, in whom is the Church. For the Lord flows in with an angel and with a man of the Church from the good of love and charity. The angel and the man of the Church, who is in the good of love and charity, receives the Lord in the truths of doctrine and of faith which he has from the Word. Thereby conjunction is effected, which is called the heavenly marriage. This marriage is in the single things of the Word, because it is in the single things the Word itself may be called the heavenly marriage. That there is such a marriage in the single things of the Word has been shown in many places in the Arcana Celestia, and also in the doctrine of the New Jerusalem, where it treats of the Word. That there is such a marriage there can be seen only by those who study its internal or spiritual sense, for everywhere, and conspicuously in the prophets, there are two expressions for one thing, of which one refers to good, thus to the Lord, and the other to truth, thus to the Church. This is clearly seen by one who has a knowledge of correspondences. For there are senses and words which correspond to good, and there are correspondences which correspond to truths. Hence now there is a conjunction of the Lord with heaven, and with the Church by means of the Word. Since there is a marriage in the Word, therefore there is in it a spiritual sense, and there is a celestial sense. The spiritual sense for those who are in the Lord's spiritual kingdom, who constitute all the lower heavens, and the celestial sense for those who are in the Lord's celestial kingdom, who constitute all the higher heavens. The angels of the spiritual kingdom are in the truths of the Word, but the angels of the celestial kingdom are in the goods of the Word. When therefore a man reads the Word with reverence, spiritual angels, according to correspondences, perceive truths therein, and celestial angels perceive goods. But, and this is an arcanum, the celestial angels do not perceive the goods therein immediately from man, but immediately through the spiritual angels. The reason is that scarcely any one in the Christian world at this day is in the good of celestial love, but only some are in truths, wherefore the good of love cannot pass immediately from man to the celestial angels, of whom the third heaven consists, but passes immediately through the spiritual angels, of whom the second heaven is composed. The marriage of the Lord with the Church thus exists also in the heavens by means of the Word, for the Word in its spiritual sense treats of the Church, but in the celestial sense of the Lord. Therefore the spiritual angels apply all things to the Church, but the celestial angels all things to the Lord. Hence heaven is compared by the Lord to a marriage, and is also called a marriage, and hence the Word effects that marriage. By this is an arcanum, which can be perceived only obscurely by man, while it is clearly perceived by an angel of heaven. The celestial angels can apply to the Lord all things which spiritual angels apply to the Church, because the Lord is the all of the Church. Chapter 9. They who have for an end magnificence and honors in the world, and also in heaven, and those who have for an end wealth and gain in the world, and those who have for an end the fame of learning, do not see and do not find anything of genuine truth in the Word. It has been given me to speak with many in the spiritual world who believed that they would shine as stars in heaven, because they, as they said, held the Word holy, often read it, gathered many things from it, and by it confirmed the dogmas of their faith, and hence were esteemed learned in the world, and themselves believed with others that they would be Michaels and Raphaels. But many of them, having been explored as to the love from which they studied the Word, it was found that some had done so from the love of self, that they might appear great in the world, and be worshipped as primates of the Church, some that they might obtain the fame of learning, and be so promoted to honors, some that they might gain wealth, and some that they might preach learnedly. Afterwards, when examined to see whether they had learned anything of genuine truth from the word, it was found that they knew nothing whatever, except that which is obvious to everyone in the sense of the letter, and nothing of genuine truth which might serve interiorly for doctrine. This was because themselves and the world had been their ends, but not the Lord in heaven. And when such are the ends, then man, with his mind, clings to the self and the world, and continually thinks from his proprium, which is in thick darkness as to all things of heaven. For the proprium of man is mere evil, and falsity therefrom. Wherefore the man who looks to self, honor, fame, or gain in reading the word, cannot be led by the Lord away from the proprium, and thus be elevated into the light of heaven, and so cannot receive any influx from the Lord through heaven. Many such have been seen, and they every one earnestly desired heaven. And they were also admitted into heaven, but when they came thither, they were examined as to whether they knew anything of truth, as it is with angels. And they knew nothing except the bare words of the sense of the letter, and had no interior understanding of them whatever. Therefore they appeared in the eyes of the angels, stripped of their garments, and as if naked, and thus they were sent down below. Some of them in the light of heaven were deprived of the sight of the understanding, and soon of the sight of the eyes. And then they were seized with anguish of heart, and were thus led away below, still however retaining pride in their own merit. This is the lot of those who study the word and have honor, fame, and gain for their end. It is entirely different with those who study the word from the affection of truth, or who, in reading the word, take delight in truth because it is truth. These have for an end the love of God and the love of the neighbor, and for themselves they have life as an end. All these, because they love truth, receive an influx from the Lord, and see and find genuine truths in the word, for they are enlightened as to the understanding, and perceive truths in enlightenment as from themselves, though they are not from themselves, and after death they are taken up into heaven, where truth is in its own light, and there they become spiritual and angels. Chapter 10. The ultimate sense of the word, which is the sense of the letter only, corresponds to the beard and to the hairs of the head on a man-angel. That the hairs of the head and the beard correspond to the word in its ultimates may seem strange when first said or heard, but this correspondence has its cause in this, that all things of the word correspond with all things of heaven, and heaven with all things of man. For heaven in its complex is before the Lord as one man, concerning which correspondence see what is shown in the work on heaven and hell. That all things of the word correspond to all things of heaven has been given me to perceive from this, that the separate chapters in the prophetic word correspond to individual societies of heaven. For when I read through the prophetic books of the word from Isaiah to Malachi, it was given me to see that societies of heaven were called forth in their order, and perceived the spiritual sense corresponding to them. Hence, from these and other proofs, it was made plain to me that there is a correspondence of the whole heaven with the word in its series. Now, because there is such a correspondence of the word with heaven, and heaven in whole and in part corresponds to man, thence it is that the ultimate of the word corresponds to the ultimates of man. The ultimate of the word is the sense of the letter, and the ultimates of man are the hairs of the head and beard. Therefore, it is that men who have loved the word even in its ultimates, after death, when they become spirits, appear with becoming hair, and angels likewise. The same when they become angels also let the beard grow. But on the other hand, all they who have despised the sense of the letter of the word, after death when they become spirits, appear bald. This is a sign that they are without truths, and therefore, that they may not be in shame before others, they cover the head with a tiara. Because the hairs and the beard signify the ultimate of heaven, and hence the ultimates also of divine truth or the word, therefore the Ancient of Days is described as having the hair of his head like clean wool. In like manner is described the Son of Man, or the Lord as to the Word. So too the strength of Samson was in his hair, and when his hair was cut off he became weak. Naziriteship also depended on the hair, for by a Nazirite was represented the Lord as to his ultimates, thus also heaven in ultimates. This was why the 42 boys were torn by the bears, because they called Elisha bald. Elisha, like Elijah and the other prophets, represented the Lord as to the Word, and the Word without its ultimate sense, which is the sense of the letter, is not the Word. For the sense of the letter of the Word is like a vessel filled with noble wine, wherefore when the vessel is broken, all the wine is spilled. The sense of the letter is also like the bones and skin with man, which being taken away, the whole man would fall asunder. Therefore it is that the stability, yea, the power of the whole word rests in its ultimate sense, which is the sense of the letter, for this sense sustains and contains all the divine truth therein. Since baldness signifies no truth, because it has no ultimate, therefore they of the Jewish church, when they left Jehovah and rejected the word, are called bald, as in Jeremiah. Every head is bald, and every beard is cut off. On the heads is baldness, and the beard is cut off, that he should shave the head and beard with a razor. Shame shall be upon all faces, and baldness upon all heads. Every head was made bald, as also elsewhere. But the sense of the word, which is called the sense of the letter, corresponds in its ultimates to the hair of the head, and for the rest it corresponds to the various parts in man, as his head, breast, loins, and feet. But where there are these correspondences in that sense, the word is as it were clothed, and it therefore corresponds to the clothing of those parts, for garments in general signify truths, and also actually correspond to them. But yet many things in the sense of the letter of the word are naked, as without clothing, and these correspond to the face of man, and also to his hands, which parts are bare. These parts of the word serve for doctrine of the church, because in themselves they are spiritual, natural truths, whence it may be evident that there is no lack, but that man can find and see naked truths even in the letter of the word. Chapter 11. The wisdom of the angels of the three heavens is from the Lord by means of the word, to which the sense of its letter serves as a support and basis. I have heard from heaven that there was immediate revelation with the most ancient people on this earth, and that therefore they had no written word, but after their times, when immediate revelation could neither be given nor received without danger to their souls, lest the communication and conjunction of men with the heavens should be intercepted and perish, it pleased the Lord to reveal divine truth by means of the word, which was written solely by correspondences. It is therefore of such a nature in the ultimate sense, that it comprehends within itself the wisdom of the angels of the three heavens. This wisdom does not appear in our word, but yet it is within it, and how it is within it shall be briefly told. There are three heavens, one beneath another, and under them is the world. In the highest heaven is angelic wisdom in the highest degree, which is called celestial wisdom. In the middle heaven is angelic wisdom in the middle degree, which is called spiritual wisdom. But in the lowest heaven is an angelic wisdom in the lowest degree, which is called spiritual and celestial natural. In the world, because that is below the heavens, is wisdom in the lowest degree, which is called natural. All these degrees of wisdom are in the word, which is in the world, but in simultaneous order, for successive order in its descent becomes simultaneous. Therefore, that which is simultaneous becomes the complex of all its successive degrees. The highest in successive order becomes the inmost in simultaneous order. The middle becomes the middle there, and the ultimate there. Such a simultaneous order is the word in the world. In its inmost is the Lord as a sun, from which divine truth and divine good, light and flame, radiate and propagate themselves through mediates, even to ultimates. Next in that simultaneous order is the divine celestial, such as is the highest or third heaven, from which the angels there have wisdom. Then follows the divine spiritual, such as is in the middle or second heaven, from which the angels there have wisdom. After that succeeds the divine spiritual natural, and celestial natural, such as is in the ultimate or first heaven, from which the angels there have wisdom. The ultimate border of this simultaneous order is made by the divine natural, such as is in the world, from which men have wisdom. This ultimate girds about, binds together, and thus contains the interiors, that they may not flow away. Thus it serves also as a support. Such is our word in the sense of the letter, in general and also in every part. When therefore this is read with reverence by man, then its interiors are unbound and unfolded, and each heaven draws therefrom its own spiritual angels, their divine spiritual, and celestial angels their divine celestial, from which they have their wisdom. That our word is such has not only been declared and heard from heaven, but has also been shown and confirmed by much experience. The divine let down by the Lord into the world could not but pass through the heavens in their order, and exist in the world, so formed that it might in like order return through the heavens to the Lord from whom it proceeded. Chapter 12. Enlightenment by means of the Word. Every man who is in the spiritual affection of truth, that is, who loves truth itself because it is truth, is enlightened by the Lord when he reads the Word, but not the man who reads it from mere natural affection of truth, which is called the desire of knowing. The latter does not see anything except what agrees with his love, or with the principles which he has either himself adopted or derived from others by hearing or reading. In a few words, therefore, it shall be told whence and with what man there is enlightenment by means of the Word. That man has enlightenment who shuns evils because they are sins, and because they are against the Lord, and against his divine laws. With this man and with no other, the spiritual mind is opened, and so far as it is opened, the light of heaven enters, from which light is all enlightenment in the Word. For man then has a will for good, and this will, when it is determined to that use, becomes in the understanding first the affection of truth, then the perception of truth, soon by means of rational light the thought of truth, thus decision and conclusion, which, as it passes thence into the memory, also passes into the life, and so remains. This is the way of all enlightenment in the Word, and also the way of reformation and regeneration of man. But first the memory must needs have knowledges both of spiritual and natural things, for these are the stores into which the Lord operates by means of the light of heaven, and the fuller these are, and freer from confirmed falsities, the more enlightened is the perception given and the clearer the conclusion. For the divine operation does not fall into a man who is empty and void, as for example one who does not know that the Lord is pure love and pure mercy, good itself and truth itself, and that love itself and good itself are such in their essence that they cannot do evil to any one, neither be angry nor revengeful, or who does not know that the word in the sense of the letter is written in many places from appearances. Such a man cannot be enlightened by the word, where it is said of Jehovah that he is wrathful and angry, and that to him belong fire and fury, that his wrath burns even to the lowest hell, as in David, that there is no evil in the city which Jehovah hath not done, as in Amos, that he would rejoice to do evil as he had rejoiced to do good, that he leads into temptations, as in the Lord's Prayer, and similarly in other places.